there was an interesting report in the papers this week that schools are now reporting 40,000 racism cases a year. At the same time, diversity missionaries, that's what they're called, diversity missionaries are being sent into schools to teach pupils about bigotry. Now, some say this is increasing the divide between white and black children by forcing them to see everything in terms of race. Of course, all schools were placed under a duty by the government in 2002 to monitor and report all racist incidents. Primary school children and toddlers in nursery are apparently being punished for making racist claims, even if they don't understand the terms they're using. Should we be pleased or should we be worried? Adrian Hart is the author of this report, which is published by the Manifesto Club. You're a civil liberties group, Adrian.
That's correct, yeah. We take on corrosive and intrusive legislation in everyday life.
What's corrosive and intrusive about stopping primary school children being racist?
Well, I'm not saying that teachers shouldn't be trusted to do that. My problem is the official duty being placed on them. I'm effectively arguing that we don't need this kind of top-down official anti-racism in schools. The children I work with in primary schools are instinctively colourblind, and they're more ethnically mixed than ever before. In a way, they can do anti-racism all by themselves, and the problem is that teachers are under government pressure to find racist behaviour that very often is not there. And so we end up with really absurd examples. I could give you a few.
Yeah, do, please.
Well, you can have, there's a 7-year-old that's called another child chocolate bar, or a Bangladeshi kid in East London calling other Bangladeshi kids a monkey. It's those kinds of incidents are the ones that are responsible for the majority of this statistic, and it's kind of the case that schools are not being trusted enough. Teachers, we always tell kids to stop being nasty if they're picking on difference. Of course we do. Or if we feel that there's a need to sort of sit down and make it a teachable moment, we do that. But we don't need the official policy, because that kind of creates this sort of myth of widespread racism in the playground and in the classroom, which then activates local authorities to send in people like me and drama tutors and other kinds of interventions to march these kids off the playground, where they're doing something really amazing in the under 10 generation, I think, in terms of inventing a model of multicultural, multi-ethnic interaction that could teach the adult world a thing or two. And then we march them into these moments where they're invited to ponder, very often for the first time, racial identity and and why their skin colour really, really matters. And they often say to us, they put their hands up and they say, but surely it's what's on the inside that matters. And so I say, I think, in a way, of course, the riposte comes, surely children, even when they use these kinds of banter and insults, I feel like saying, look, the playground is a messy place, okay? It's like fizzing with friendships and falling out and making up. Now, of course they insult each other, they're kids.
But now, you don't approve of the idea of what we now have in our schools, something called a racist incident referral form.
Yes, exactly. The problem with that is, schools have always kept their own records, and I support them doing that. But the government pressure to kind of reach for these forms using a zero-tolerance approach, and the recommended definition very often is of a racist incident is any incident perceived to be racist by the victim or any other person. So we get quite a lot of examples where the kids haven't even fallen out, but a playground supervisor or a teacher assistant has themselves felt offended or felt that in some sense this must surely meet with the policy. And then, of course, once that perception has been made, then it becomes necessary to file an incident report to the local authority. And I think this is sort of does no service to anti-racism. I'm a committed anti-racist, and I think it's a travesty and really quite damaging that this world of children, which is really amazing, I can't stress this enough in the under 10 age group right now, that this world of children then gets sort of interfered with a policy that's so determined to elevate playground spats or just somebody overhearing something that they think might have a kind of racial element into racism. And it's dangerous because all this does is make things worse as kids start to take on that. Yeah.
Sorry, Adrian, what are diversity missionaries, which your report identifies? What are they?
I didn't use that phrase. I did use the phrase the race missionaries to describe this kind of slightly overzealous kind of government layer of officials that are pushing the policy onto schools. They're basically saying to schools, if you are not filing racist incidents on a termly basis, you must be ignoring it, and if you're ignoring it, you must be condoning racism. That phrase, almost word for word, you can see in lots and lots of local authority websites and on the government's advice to teachers called TeacherNet.
But aren't you overreacting to it? Or surely all the government is trying to do, to be fair to it, is to make kids young, get them early. It's what the Jesuits used to say about the Catholics. Get them young, get them early, and to stop them using racist language.
Well, I think I think that's quite telling, really, because I mean, how are we really imagining children here? What are we saying? Stop behaving childishly. I mean, it's a kind of, it actually goes against what we used to know about child development and how certainly at break time, children really, really need. It's vital to their development into adulthood that they experience unfettered peer interaction, and discover the consequences of their cruelty and their kindness. The schools I'm working in, and which are many, and over 12 years, I can't count how many, but in those schools, kids are doing an amazing job of operating anti-racism all by themselves out there. They're kind of showing us that race doesn't matter to them, and when they fall out, they do grab onto usable insults. They're in the air. We've had one school that from years 6, the term gay came into use, and it went all the way into the school's nursery. What are we saying? The 3-year-olds are homophobic. It's at that point that all I'm really saying is, let's trust teachers to know when and if and how to intervene. The problem with policy, the top-down policies, it's just a kind of managerialism, really. It's an exercise where the government is very keen to be seen to be taking racism seriously. And I'm trying to really stand up for children, who they really are, and stand up for teachers and say, let's trust their authority. And when we work in schools, we always intervene when kids are being nasty to each other, and we're always on the lookout for targeted and sustained bullying. That is a different matter. And the problem with the policy, when you end up with tens of thousands of racist incidents forming a sort of a big kind of rump of statistics, is that there's a tendency of, and this is where I criticize the race missionaries at local government level, is that there's this assumption on their part that cases of serious and targeted bullying are somehow the tip of the iceberg. And I'm saying, actually, that iceberg is nothing like that. It's basically children engaged in the furious and energetic world of being a child. And it also, I would add, it's like kind of patronizing to black and minority ethnic kids by assuming that they're endlessly vulnerable. They're sort of hapless victims with no resilience. And what we find is that they're very resilient, and that schools have a very good record of noticing when there's a difference in that pattern. And they look out for patterns.
OK, that's Adrian Hart. Thank you for joining. That's Adrian Hart. He's the author of the report, The Myth of Racist Kids, which calculates that some 280,000 incidents have been logged on something called racist incident referral forms. Well, the question I'm asking you is this: is Adrian Hart right? This is overzealous. It's excessive. We should rely on the teachers to intervene. We do not need what he calls race missionaries. What do you think? Maybe your kid has been at school, your child has been at school and has been the victim of racism, or maybe your child has been tipped off by the teachers or by these race missionaries for using unfortunate language, or maybe you're somebody who's been abused yourself because of your skin colour and you think this is a pretty good idea. Get 'em young, get 'em early. Call me now, 0845 6060 973. Text me on 84850. Email